Welcome to Canuck of the Dead. I am your host, Rob Bellamy, and today's guest is quite the filmmaker. I met him accidentally and found out he's actually from my hometown. So it's been an interesting friendship getting, learning about what he's done so far, where he is. So without further ado, and I could talk for hours on it, but I'm just going to bring him on. This is Ryan M. Andrews. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us today.
You know me, man. I love to talk, especially if it's about horror. So,
right. That's when this topic came up. It's like, who can I speak with? Who can I? Oh, I know.
There you go.
Yes. Well, let me just jump right out of the gate because horror is people are drawn to horror. And I wanted to get your opinion. Why do you think it has the fascination it does? Like romance doesn't, comedy doesn't, not like horror.
No, definitely not like horror. I mean, genre in general, whether it's horror, sci-fi, fantasy, it's because it's a bigger escapism. Like if you're gonna watch a drama about Jennifer Lopez as a maid in Manhattan, and falling in love, it's like, okay, well, this is just regular life where somebody goes to work, does this, meets that person, and that's it. Whether it's horror, sci-fi, fantasy, whether it's spaceships and aliens, whether it's vampires and werewolves, I mean, the reality is, in real life, I would never want to run into a vampire or a werewolf, because I'm not stupid. I would not want to run into a serial killer either, right? Or a zombie. Who wants to run into a zombie in real life? I mean, I'm sure there's the nuts that, can't wait for a zombie apocalypse, but the reality is they'd be the first ones to die. But that's the thing. It's an escapism where it's fantasy world. It's the further outside of normal life you go, the more fun and exciting it is. And I think all genre films, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, have that. So whether it's, like kids watching Harry Potter and getting caught up in the mystical, magical elements in that, or whether it's, watching, can I swear?
I think so.
I should have asked earlier, but watching like a zombie rip some head off. I mean, it's it's that idea where it's like the further outside of the reality you go, the more the imagination works. So in a way, you could just say that horror fans are more imaginative people, and we need that more imaginative narrative to entice our brains.
I see what you mean about the escapism too, because people look at certain films and they go, okay, what's the best kill from that movie? And that's not a normal characteristic or a topic you would bring up at the dinner table.
Well, I don't know what dinner tables you sit at, but I think I've had that conversation a few times.
Okay. Well, yes. Doing your writing and stuff, I guess you would. And talking about movies, I guess you would too. But like you said, it's that escape,
Yeah.
And I guess is that what drew you to it?
In a way, yes. I mean, before I got into film, and I'm talking when I'm barely able to stand. I mean, as a little kid, I have an older brother, and he got me into storytelling. And it was the idea of oh, I'm going to be a writer one day, right? As soon as I learned how to print, I was trying to write my first novel, kind of thing. And, it was just that idea of telling stories. And then still as this little kid, it's the idea of going out to, well, you would know where Rondo Park is.
Yeah.
Where we grew up in that area. So we would go out to Rondo Park and we'd have campfires. And of course, the first thing someone's going to do around a campfire is not tell a love story.
No.
So I started getting into the idea of these folklore tales and, these spooky ghost stories and that kind of thing. And that was my first kind of foray into horror, was through campfire tales and that kind of thing, which then, obviously hearing about and learning about, books like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and things like that kind of piqued my interest. But then as far as the film aspect went, I mean, the first real horror film I saw was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at a very, very young age. But before that, I was seeing reruns of hilarious House of Frightenstein with Vincent Price. And so it's just like immediately as like this 5-year-old kid, or 6-year-old kid, I'm like in love with Vincent Price. Like this guy is so cool. Everything about him just like he's from St. Louis, Missouri, but he sounds like he's British. Like he's got this sophisticated kind of canter for how he delivers everything, and like
You rasp.
yeah, there's just something so cool about everything Vincent Price does, and so I was hooked, and then also again still watching Hilarious House Frightenstein, and you had all those tales like with the librarian, where the librarian would try to tell a spooky story, and Gazilda the witch making her potions and stuff, and it was fun. And that's what really drew me into it, and I just love the fun craziness of it. And so that was kind of what got me into horror as a whole. But then it was like suddenly, okay, put your seatbelt on because you're about to go to the next level. Here's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at a really young, impressionable age. But knowing that, this was all fake and make believe, I was more fascinated by, the makeup, the effects. How did they do that? How did they make that look real? And almost trying to analyze it and pick it apart, right? Like, and I think, nobody really knows, hey, what's the name of the person who did the makeup for Jojo Rabbit? No one really knows, but whether it's Rick Baker or whether it's Tom Savini, whether it's KMB or Wayne Toth. I mean, makeup effects teams in the horror genre are rock stars, and that's what it got into. Like, wow, how did they hang this girl on this meat hook in Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, there's like this ring and this and that, and it's like you just really I just really fell in love with that aspect of it. So naturally, and before I even knew I'd want to make movies, it was kind of already implanted in my brain that, okay, you know what? You love how these things get made, so you have to make them. It's not just about telling stories; it's about telling those stories on screen, in this visual medium.
Is that what, like, the first movie I ever got to see of yours was Sick, Survive the Night, the zombie one. But like you said, it's more of a Walking Dead style where it focuses more on the people than
Yes.
Is that what made you decide to do that as a feature?
Well, I mean, like the idea with Sick, Survive the Night. I mean, Chris Cull, who's my editor on numerous features and shorts, and like we also produced Art of Obsession together and stuff. Like we've been working together for a long time, and so we co-wrote Sick, and he originally came up with the initial concept of it. Prior to that, I've always wanted to do a zombie film, but I just never knew when to do one because like everything goes in cycles, right? Where back in the early 90s, vampires were huge with Bram Stoker's Dracula and Interview with a Vampire, but then they kind of died out and something else came in, and and then vampires came back, and so it's kind of
killed it.
Yeah, of course. But then zombies are universal all time. There's never a downtime for zombies, which could be good or bad. I mean, because then people complain about there always being too many zombie films out there or zombie stories. But I always thought if I wanted to do a zombie film, my favorite zombie film is Romero's Day of the Dead. Like the opening, which starts just like, and I see that. Yeah, I see it.
I was figured if I had dawn or day on.
Yeah, check first. The opening, is just like in 28 Days Later and stuff, and the thing I really loved about Day of the Dead, aside from Tom Savini's really awesome like gore and stuff, is like these characters have been surviving for so long after the apocalypse happened that they're all assholes. They're all horrible people. You have all these soldiers that are jerks, and then your Dr. Frankenstein character. I mean, he's lost it anyways. He's a nutcase, even though he's kind of the good guy. And I kind of thought, well, yeah, if I'm going to make a zombie film, and it's not just like at the start of the apocalypse and it's 2 years into it, the characters, I mean, they have to have their arcs and everything, and they have to have motivation behind what they do, but there are no good guys. All the good guys are dead. All the good guys got bit long ago. The only people that can survive a zombie apocalypse are the assholes that will trip you and keep going, that kind of thing. So, I wanted to make this kind of different take of a zombie story where, it focused more on the people trying to survive and what they're like. And I know there's been many other zombie films that have focused more on people, but just kind of my take to it, I wanted to approach it that way, which would make it a bit more of a dramatic story. And so it's kind of less zombies. That's fine. I mean, it's not about having hordes and hordes of zombies in the movie. It's about basically, just like any Romero zombie film is about a social commentary towards our society and capitalism and all that stuff. And Sick Survive the Night is a social commentary as well towards, basic human behavior.
Well, even if you look at the granddaddy of them all, Night of the Living Dead, the actual zombies don't take up a huge portion of that film. The vast majority of that is inside that house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of the idea, because, it's like once you pull back the curtain and reveal the monster, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we've seen it. The more you see it, the more desensitized you become to it. So yeah, the zombie kills gotta look good. The zombies themselves should look good. But, if you want to have a good zombie film, or if you want my opinion on what makes a good zombie film, it's what zombies like the living, what they're about and how they interact. That's what the film should be about. And so, yeah, Night of the Living Dead had that. Dawn of the Dead had that. Day of the Dead had that. Kind of moving past all those, 28 Days Later had that. And I don't want to freaking hear from anyone who says, oh, well, that wasn't a zombie because they were, it's still a fucking zombie. I mean, at the end of the day, there's different kinds of zombie stories. They don't all have to shamble along. I mean, the reality is, before they started shambling, there were really great zombie films that were about like voodoo, like White Zombie and Revolt of the Zombies, like from the 1930s. I mean, they only started becoming these cannibalistic, reanimated corpses, in the 60s. And even then, like they were just cannibals. They weren't eating brains. I think really, other than Return of the Living Dead, where they were suddenly eating brains, and I threw that in Sick. So in Sick, the zombies eat brains, but it's not like they really are like going after brains. It's a cliche to say that zombies want brains, but just to kind of play with that, we came up with a cool scientific reason why the zombies are going after the brain. And so in Debbie Rochon's dialogue in the film, where she's like doing those vlog posts about studying these zombies, why they go after the pineal gland and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's like, to me, it's a different take on zombies. And you don't have to love it, you don't have to like it. It's a different take, so like it for what it is.
But that's it. It's creating that mythos. Like you said, zombies are literally reanimated corpses. So it's however they become reanimated. And yeah. I think the biggest one that I saw recently was called The Last of Us, a video game. And it's a fungus-based zombie. You know, it's based on an actual fungus now that is around that can zombify insects.
Well, there you go.
So,
the whole world is screwed.
Yep. Actually, what was the movie called? The Girl with All the Gifts.
I don't know that one.
Oh, you have got to watch that because it's the closest to the video game. It talks about this spore and it shows what would happen. But again,
it makes me think of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because it was like these spores from outer space coming in these pods that the people came out of. So we've always had those kind of stories and everything, and I mean that's a cool take on zombies. So,
and I think that's where you have to come up with something fresh, because zombies are always around. I think any filmmaker worth his grain of salt wants to make a zombie movie. It doesn't matter. You want to. It's how
Yeah.
you do it, like you said, and when you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So then what made you switch? Because your next film after that was called Save Yourself, which is a different twist on the horror.
Well, that's the thing. I want every film of mine to be different. I mean, the reality is when I think about different like the horror genre, I mean, it's like you've got slasher, you've got psychological thriller, you've got more sci-fi based, you've got ghost story. I mean, there's just so many. So it's like I could have a whole career just only making horror films. And between doing a grindhouse film and doing a psychological thriller and doing like a torture porn or something, every story would be different, but still within horror. So obviously, I wanted to switch up with after doing the zombie film with Save Yourself, which was a story that Chris Cole and I came up with when we were driving to a festival down in Oklahoma. We were driving from Toronto down to Oklahoma, so it's like a 20-hour drive. It's like middle of the night. I think somewhere either Indiana or Illinois or something, and we just kind of. I mean, I already had an idea of what I wanted to kind of tell, and it was like, this idea of, well, hey, we're on this road trip, so you have a movie about a road trip. But again, because you want to do stuff with a fresh take, the idea was, okay, well, when people go on a road trip, what are your characters? Well, there's the boyfriend and the girlfriend and the other couple. So you always have couples. Well, fuck that. Don't want to do a film like that. All right, well, then do we have all guys? No. Why would we do that? Right. So we have 5 women on a road trip. So the first thing you're going to think of is 5 women on a road trip. Okay. And they're going cross country through America. Well, they're going to run into those backwoods hillbillies. Okay. So we can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't tell a story about backwoods hillbillies because obviously that's what everybody would think of. All right. So what's worse? What is the worst thing you can think of? What is the worst kind of person? Nazis. So, the idea is, all right, so they run into Nazis. All right, well, how are we going to do that? Because, we're not going to get people dressed up in Nazi uniform. We're like, okay, well, what if it's not Nazi? What if it's like, so spitballing ideas about just creating this story where it's like, okay, well, 5 women, not against hillbillies. Okay, they're against Nazis, but we don't want Nazis. Okay, well, like, what if it's a mad scientist? All right, well, then looking into history as well, after World War II, there's Operation Paperclip, where the American government took Nazi scientists and brought them to America, and those scientists helped them with space landing and other things like that. And this is what they did. Okay, cool. We could actually run with that and actually create a thing where like there's a Nazi mad scientist, in America. And okay, well, we're not making a period film, so how do we make it present day? Oh, well, let's do that. So we just kind of spitballed the whole trip about how we can tell this kind of story. And then, like we made the film with Post City Sound in Toronto, Peanut Hill Lily and Al Ormerod. And, I wrote the script with Mitch Lackey. And we just obviously we went back and forth throughout many times. And, I mean, there's positives and negatives about creating something by committee, where everybody has stuff to throw in and ideas to throw in because, that saying of too many cooks spoil the soup, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the case with Save Yourself because I think everybody was able to, appreciate where everybody else was coming from and we were able to keep one concise vision for it. But I'm always nervous when, it's like, oh, let's bring in another person. Let's bring in another person because it's like, no, why The Sopranos is one of the greatest TV shows of all time? Because it was created by David Chase. It was made by David Chase. And he had, the end goal in mind the whole time. So that's why it worked. It wasn't like big group of people. But yeah, with Save Yourself, it was just that idea of like, all right, we want to tell this different kind of story. And we originally went with the idea of we would tell it in this kind of exploitation grindhouse kind of vibe, like there was like there's still some jokes in the script. There's so there'd be like some funny moments, and just this idea, because it's so ludicrous about, this 120-year-old Nazi scientist, um, being alive. It's the way I look at it too, is if you haven't seen it yet, I mean, go watch it, but spoiler alert.
Okay.
Um,
That's why I didn't say too much. I didn't know what you wanted to give away.
Here's the thing, like something that is just coming out now or came out last year or something like that. Sure. But it's like, hey, we can talk about Darth Vader actually being Luke's father,
That's safe.
like people can do that now. But if you did that back 40 years ago, maybe not. But yeah, so the idea with Save Yourself, um, it was kind of approached that in a fun, tongue in cheek way, but it also worked in a more serious manner. And we definitely kind of treaded the line with that one. But yeah, from day one, the idea was I just did a zombie film. I don't want to do that again. Got to make something a little more tongue in cheek, kind of fun. It was still dramatic and character driven, but it was definitely a different style.
Well, and see, that was the fun thing too, because again, watching that one and then going into your third one, you hit a new genre again. It's that psychological where you did Art of Obsession.
Yes, yes. That was kind of more my David Lynch obsessed mind, kind of, because when I got a little bit older after watching, all the slasher films of the 80s and stuff and growing up on Freddy and Jason and all that, you know, I definitely got into David Lynch's work. Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, um, Racerhead, films like that. And they're horrifying in their own right, but they're still, really cool, dramatic, psychological films. And there's a certain style to it, which I didn't want to copy, but I was definitely influenced by. And so Art of Obsession was all right, let's make an avant-garde art house kind of psychological thriller. Um, you know, I just did this film, Save Yourself, where, we have the writer character talking about, you know, you don't split up in a horror movie, and well, they're all splitting up, so it's like we're not doing the tongue-in-cheek, we're not doing the self-aware, self-referential kind of storytelling here. Let's go more serious, maybe too serious, I don't know, but it definitely is that more of an art house kind of vibe. It's definitely more of a David Lynch kind of like creepy surrealist world. And again, there's just something to offer people as something different. It's a story about, you know I mean, it's basic. It's an obsession story where this guy kidnaps his neighbor that he's obsessed with. But it's not just, oh, hey, girl, she's cute, I'm going to kidnap her. It's more based around the idea of psychologically, with him being an artist, and he sees this woman as his muse, because you know we as artists, we give and we give and we give so much of ourselves, and we sacrifice our health and well-being, all because we're trying to create art. And so it's kind of this thing of, we give ourselves over to the muse, like, is this evil being in a way, and we do all this, like, we sacrifice so much to tell these stories. It's not for the money, because I mean, maybe 5% of every artist is actually successful in Hollywood or this and that. If you want to get into making movies, don't get into it for the money, because you're going to spend 20 years not getting any. And you know like, if and when that happens for you, great, but don't get into it for that reason. You get into it because there's a need to create. There's a need to be an artist, because you want to share your creations with the world, whether it's writing stories, whether it's acting out parts as an actor, whether it's music, if as a composer, or just if you're in a band. I mean, you don't write songs just to keep them for yourself. You go play them live, you go, release them so people can hear them and enjoy them. And that's what you really get out of it. But it's such a difficult road that you know, there's got to be something wrong with us to want to do this.
Yeah, if there's no passion there, you're setting yourself up for failure. You really are.
No, absolutely.
But I can see that with Art of Obsession. I can see that, he has that drive and he's hoping, this is what's going to give him what he needs.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
and that's kind of what it's about. And like Rye Barrett, who was in both Save Yourself and Art of Obsession, he really delved into that character. I mean, like, to me as well, like I growing up, at the age I am now, I mean, the reality is I grew up, at the right time to be witnessing the grunge genre. And all our heroes from the grunge genre are pretty much dead. And it's either suicide or drug overdose. Like whether it's Kurt Cobain, Lane Staley, Chris Cornell, and Scott Weiland, many, many, many years later after that. Eddie Vedder's the only one still there. But so the reality is, seeing that whole genre, it's like, what is it about that genre that sent so many of them to the grave? I mean, the whole grunge scene was created really with Mother Love Bone. They were the first like signed grunge band that kind of helped usher in that whole genre. And they recorded their album, and the singer Andrew Wood died. Before they could release it. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, but I mean, the rest of the band went on and created Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
But like, Chris Cornell and Temple of the Dog did Say Hello to Heaven. That's about Andrew Wood. And Alice in Chains song Wood, that's about him. Like the whole genre is based around death and people dying and junkies doing drugs and like, why is this? Why did we all get into this? And it's just because it spoke to us. And so the music that spoke to me the most growing up, like when I started high school and all this, is this like depressing, apathetic world. And, we wanted to play with that in Art of Obsession, that idea where I think even the way Rye Barrett looked in that film, he had a bit of a, kind of a Lane Staley, Kurt Cobain kind of look going on, like with the bit of the hair. I mean, he definitely had that bit of a grunge kind of vibe going on. So yeah, that's the difference between making what we were talking about earlier, where it's like you make a film that's all depressing and shit, or then you make a fun film. That's the depressing one.
Yeah, but it was so good. And now looking, is there a certain genre that you enjoy more? Like, I got with horror, but like the zombies, the evil scientists, the psychological, plus what's coming up. Like, is there something that you would prefer if you could just make one? Is there one you could pick?
I mean, it's like which of your children do you like best? Because I have things I can say about why I love psychological thrillers so much. The mindfuck kind of films. Why I love slashers. But I think as a whole, one thing that I have a lot of fun with, and it's not scary per se. It's more it's more, I guess, just kind of like the dirty, gritty grindhouse genre. Like we're talking about Jack Hill, early Jack Hill films like Spider Baby. Okay. And then he also made Coffee, with Pam Grier. And these films are not horror. Well, I mean, some are. Like Spider Baby has horror elements, but the whole idea behind all of that is I was attracted and am attracted to the allure of it. Like in New York City in the 70s, 42nd Street, like what Times Square now, that was the deuce. That was like just row of movie theaters showing these like really cheap made exploitation kind of films. And, you have all these different styles, whether it's like car exploitation, whether it's like, like early torture porn kind of elements, or whether it's like just like more action film kind of stuff. Like for me, I just love the whole mythos around grindhouse films. And so I definitely love those as a whole. And so I guess you could call that my favorite. Even the posters. I love the posters of grindhouse films because they have that kind of faded, torn, with these books here, you can see the faded, torn edges on them. I love that vibe and feel way more than a lot of others. And that's not taking away anything from slashers, because I love slashers too. And I love the fun 80s, like body count films, death every 10 pages. I mean, they're all great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Ryan, for joining us for this episode. If you want some bonus stuff, hang around, because we do have some more questions I'm going to ask him, about a certain thing coming up very, very soon, and maybe some stuff going on. So stick around for some bonus stuff.